Okay, so last thing I want to talk about is modern endpoint management. This was a buzzword that started, I don't know, probably a year or so ago that seemed to really start to ramp up this concept of modern management. So as you can see, kind of the sub point there is challenge everything. When you start looking at modern management, you kind of got to wipe the slate clean of this is how I've always done it, right? Because the tools and the technology that enable modern management don't fit into that mold at all. So you really got to challenge yourself to kind of break out of your own mind and how we've always done things to take an objective look at modern management and how it can actually help you. So as we talk about traditional endpoint management, right, we probably do build and captures, capture our WIM files, patch them, right, stick them in config-man, deploy them. Still valid, right? We do our wipe and load task sequences, still valid. Right? We have probably scripts to configure our process during our configure our operating system during task sequence. We have GPOs that we have to apply to conform to company standards. Many cases I see people running scripts to remove modern apps out of Windows 10 because we don't want people playing Candy Crush because they shipped it with Enterprise for whatever reason. We have VPNs, right, that we have to manage to get access back to our data. We deploy our apps and our software updates each month, right? We package all of our stuff and stick it into config-man. This is all things that we've probably been doing for the last 15 to 20 years. Now, granted, the technology has come a long way from where it was 20 years ago, and we were trying to do this stuff, and we had to write everything in batch files and stuff. It was very much a pain. So the technology has definitely increased to allow us to do traditional management very well. Cross-shipping broken devices, right? So I've got a road warrior, their device breaks. How do we handle that? Generally we say, we'll ship you a new one, you ship your old one back. Right, I'm infected with the virus, okay, ship us your computer, we'll ship you a new one. A lot of cross-shipping of devices going on in traditional management. So really, to me, this kind of comes down to 4 basic questions. I'm just gonna throw them up there. 4, there we go. All right. Our lot in life as IT people is I need to be able to provide apps and data securely. Right? I need to protect the user data to make sure things like data loss prevention policies that sensitive data doesn't leak out of my organization. I need to protect that user account from being compromised and used in malicious ways. And I want to make computing easy. And I think unfortunately all too often we take that 4th bullet and that really becomes an afterthought, right? Because we're so focused on making sure everything's secure, right? And making sure everything's locked down and the user can't disrupt all this awesome stuff that we do, which generally leads to a not so great user experience on the other side. So really taking, especially as the new generation of IT people come up, right? They're not going to expect that their machine is going to get pixie built and I have to wait and all this other stuff, right? My kids grew up with instant access. I press a button, I get what I need, right? Their attention span is like 15 minutes. It's like the average YouTube video. So the user experience is all too often overlooked as part of this process because the goal in any organization, right, is to make our users as productive as they can be, which makes the business more productive, which makes the business more profitable, right? Which is our ultimate goal, is to keep the business moving forward, right? Save money. If we can get a very easy, friendly user experience and still provide them with secure apps and data, right, and secure their accounts, that makes for a very happy end user, right, and a very less frustrated IT department in many cases. So the optimization, right, for the hero moments here is, first is, like we said, question everything you do today traditionally, because modern management does not fit into that mold. It's a vastly different experience. Next thing would be start familiarizing yourself with the modern management technology. So we're going to get to a slide after this one that shows kind of a large chunk of the subset of technology that can make up this modern management experience. But really, you're talking about Azure Active Directory, right? If you have Office 365, you have Azure Active Directory. Now, to the extent of which you can use that to do other things relies on being licensed for Azure Active Directory Premium or EMS, or the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. So having Azure Active Directory is the fundamental directory service, right, that you're going to use for your Windows 10 devices. If you're not aware, you can take a Windows 10 device and in the out-of-box experience, you put your email address, right, to the user. It's their email and their password. It's their user account and password, and let the out-of-box experience automatically enroll, join Azure Active Directory as your directory instead of your on-prem Active Directory. Have it apply conditional access policies, right, that we've talked about. Have it auto-enroll in Microsoft Intune to be managed as a device, and if you have an on-prem infrastructure, you can have that also deploy a config manager agent to your device so that you're now in a co-managed scenario. And I can do this from anywhere I can get internet. Right? So that's kind of the whole concept around modern management is I don't want to have to be on my corporate network in order to provision a device. I want to be able to take a device directly from an OEM, go to Best Buy, if you will, right? I don't think we're there yet. Most companies aren't ready for that yet. But technically, you say, my requirements for you to work here is I need a Windows 10 professional or better, and I want a TPM chip. That's requirements. I don't care what the piece of hardware is. Go buy it, make sure it meets that requirements, right? We're not quite there yet. I think most people still want to control some standards around their hardware. But you could certainly go to a choose your own device, right? You select, these are the approved devices, and however you achieve those, you could do that. I think eventually we will get to a point where the underlying hardware is inconsequential. Right? Because really what we're doing here is we want to manage a Windows 10 device. We don't want to manage a Lenovo, T470. We care about Windows and how we can interact with Windows and provide application and user data. So there's a slew of technology in Azure Active Directory, especially on the premium side, that allows you to do a lot of really feature-rich things. So take an objective look, right? Once you start to familiarize yourself with the tools, right? Do some research. I think you can even spin up free labs with at Microsoft, one of their websites you can spin up and kind of put yourself through an Intune scenario and some, does anybody know what that's called? It's not virtual labs, but there's anyway, if you Google it, you'll find it. So think objectively how a modern management scenario can work in your organization. Right? Road warriors are prime for modern management. People who never connect to your network or rarely connect to your network. Right? How many challenges do we have with those users when we give them a domain joined device and then they go off the network for 300 days? Right? Their password has changed, but I'm not on the network, so now my password and my cache credentials are out of sync. Right? Numerous challenges, right? Unless they're doing cloud like OneDrive for Business, right? How are they syncing data back to their corporate network? Maybe they have to use a VPN. Okay, well now I have to rely on a VPN to make sure my data is backed up, things like that. So tons of challenges. The machine falling off the domain, so next time they come in, they plug in, I can't log in because the trust relationship has been broken. All of that fun stuff that we've been dealing with for years for road warriors. Most of that stuff goes right out the window in a modern management scenario, right? Because I don't have those restrictions. I can join a directory that's in the cloud. I don't have to be connected to my corporate network. The next piece is pilot it, right? Once you start to familiarize yourself with the tools, you can get a free version of Intune, a trial version of Intune if you want to take it for a spin, right? See how it works for you. You could sign up for a free trial of Azure Active Directory, right? Put all this stuff together in a pilot and figure out, does this make sense for my organization? I can tell you, I don't believe that modern management is the solution for all machines at all companies right now. I don't think it's there yet. I think we're headed to that direction. But I think it is absolutely in a scenario where if you have mobile workforce, this is a prime example of how to increase or decrease your administrative overhead for managing these devices and give the user a much better experience. Because if I'm out with a Windows 10 device and I'm Azure Active Directory joined and Intune joined and I've got all my policies and stuff there, and my device gets infected with a virus and I can't get it off, right? They call the IT department, go to settings, click reset. Wipe the operating system back to Windows 10 default, my out-of-box experience, put my user credentials back in. Now I've rejoined Active Directory, all my Intunes, my applications, my policies, my configuration all come right back down to my machine. Maybe I'm setting up OneDrive for Business and folder redirection, so if I had desktops and documents and all of that, boom, that's all comes back as soon as I'm in my OneDrive. So without any IT involvement at all, other than saying, go reset your device and log back in, I've just redeployed that machine on the internet, right? Didn't have to be on a corporate network. So those are the kind of things you got to think about when you start thinking about what am I doing today, and how can this type of scenario make my job easier and make my users less frustrated, because they don't have to wait for a broken or a cross-ship device and things like that. They can just reset it and go back about their day, and in a couple of hours, right? They're back up and running. So it's very, very powerful stuff. And this has come a long way. I can tell you when we were doing presentations on Intune three years ago or so, it was pretty primitive at that time. It is nothing what it looks like today. So the cloud capabilities of Intune are always continuing to grow. Just recently, Microsoft released administrative templates for Intune, right? So if you think about GPOs, right, administrative templates in your group policies, we didn't have that capability in Intune, but now we do. We have a lot of configuration capabilities with administrative templates now in the cloud. So every month or every few months when they do incremental updates to Intune, they're adding lots and lots of really cool new features. They're going to make modern management even more easy to go about your business. So again, it starts with the mindset change, right? About, and most people are guilty of this, including myself, right? It's like, well, I'm very familiar with how we do it today, and that's how we've always done it, and it works very well. So, I may not need to do this, right? But this is going to be the future, right? One way or the other. I don't know how long that future is, if it's 5, 10 years away, but the concept of taking a device, right, and taking that perfectly good operating system off of it and reapplying my own with all these configurations and all this complexity around it, right, that will eventually go away, right? The idea behind Windows 10 is that there's already a good operating system. I can reconfigure that however I want it. I can change it from a pro SKU to an enterprise SKU if I need to. I don't have to wipe the operating system off to do that. So I can do a lot of what I would normally do in a wipe and load scenario. I can now do that with an existing operating system that sits on that device. So that just kind of shows you the life cycle process of Windows Autopilot, which is one of the ways to optimize this process. Right? So it's basically, has anybody ever used like the Apple DEP program? Yeah. So it's very similar in concept to the Apple DEP, right? You set your devices up, you pre-configure how you want those devices to look, and when those devices join your domain, that information is immediately applied to that device. All right, so it gives you a very easy out-of-box experience for an end user, right? So I can ship a device directly to an end user, or have, if Dell's my vendor, I can say just ship that laptop directly to Sally in Houston, right? She gets that. I've already configured the autopilot for that device. All she has to do is power it on, make sure it's connected to the network. The rest of it takes over, right? I can start applying applications, settings, conditional access, MFA. I can go through all of that stuff, right? As part of that out-of-box experience. And then very shortly thereafter, it's business ready. So I've supplied her with the apps, maybe her data through OneDrive, right? If I break or for whatever reason that device needs to be reset, I can just reset it and the whole process starts over again, right? So I don't have to go pixie build that machine to get rid of bad things happening on it. So very, very cool and powerful tools. So again, it allows us to pre-configure, improves the out-of-box self-service experience, right? Auto-enrollment as part of this process into Intune for management and ongoing settings. And then again, the concept of managing the existing OS, right? So it's Windows 10. What you're going to wipe and load off of it is also Windows 10. We can just reconfigure it. Right? You can work with your OEM too if you want to make sure it's a vanilla image, right? You can give that to your OEM and say, this is what I want you to apply to my devices. If you're concerned about, what your OEM may be putting in the default operating system. But again, you can just use Intune to uninstall all of that stuff as part of the configuration if you want. Right? I don't need to wipe the operating system on it. I just need to reconfigure it and conform it to my standards, which you can do now, which is very cool stuff. Right? So apply your standards for compliance to the existing operating system. So the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, is everybody familiar with this? I know some of you guys are licensed for it already, but it's a suite of tools revolved around Azure Active Directory. So rights management you get with enterprise mobility. So if you want to secure things like emails and people putting attachments in emails, right? Rights management is built into the cloud service where you can take advantage of that and create secure profiles so that you can send secure emails without people being able to forward them or print them or things like that. Starts with Windows 10, right? Technically you can use Windows 8.1 I think still, but don't do that. Still manage it with ConfigMan, right? You have Microsoft Intune as part of that. Office 365 is a big part of that, right? OneDrive for Business is part of that modern management scenario. The Azure Active Directory, advanced threat analytics, conditional access policies, right? Or information protection policies. All of these tools, right, can be combined to create a very easy to understand from a user perspective process of provisioning a device to a much less required time for our engineers, right? We can configure this much easier than we can go through the process of standing up ConfigMan and creating all these complex deployment processes. So I personally believe that this is going to be what the future is, right? That eventually the days of pixie booting a machine are going to be very much behind us, at least for the majority, right? Today, I don't think this is a good displacement for traditional back office machines yet, but we are getting there rapidly. But there's certainly a use case right now for it in many scenarios. Okay, so a little shameless plug here. You guys probably know this, but how can we help? Again, so we talked about when we started, we have our unified endpoint management as a project. So if there's things in here, if you want to see demonstrations, right, or you want to do a pilot or a proof of concept and things like this of modern management scenarios around Windows 10 and Intune, we can do that on a time and materials basis or statement of work, help you guys get implemented. Then we have our as a service, right, which some of our clients here and somebody I'm actually going to introduce here in a minute, to where we just work as an extension to your IT team. Right, so what we used to call ourselves is a managed services provider. We started rebranding that a while back because we don't fit into the bucket of managed service provider. So normally when you think an MSP, you think I'm outsourcing my IT to somebody else, right? Which is not what we do. We want to work with your IT team. We want to take a lot of the mundane software patching, right, managing your task sequences, keeping your operating systems up to date, things like that, off of your plate so that you can focus on the 500 business objectives that are constantly being crammed down your throat. Right, so we want to be an extension to your team, not a replacement to your team, which is why we kind of broke away from the whole managed services thing, because it doesn't really fit what we do. So the UEM as a service team, right, these are all seasoned engineers, right? They've been doing this kind of stuff for a very long time. So the ability to jump right in and start seeing immediate value in these is very apparent very quickly. So long history of managing endpoints and managing end user experiences through policies and the SMS 1.2 up till current branch today, right? Who said that? Oh, yeah. It wasn't an exciting product at all. By any stretch. So we utilize ServiceNow as a portal, so that's how we interface with our clients, very easy to interface with us. And as each contract, we also supply a subset of support hours that we can put towards things that are not necessarily detailed in your contract, the terms of the agreement. So on the right there is just a few of our UEM as a service clients that we work with to help them propel their business forward, right? The idea is for us to empower our clients to be the heroes in their organization, right? Take the day-to-day mundane stuff off their plate, work with them to talk about new technologies and maybe help them implement new technologies as it relates to their business. So we've had a lot of success, I hope,